Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This is Alan Brockstein, and before we get started, I have a quick disclaimer. None of the content within this webinar should be construed as investment advice. New Cannabis Ventures is not an intermediary, broker-dealer, investment advisor, or exchange, and does not provide investment advice or investment advisory services. No securities are being offered in this webinar, and we have no access to non-public information. This webinar is not a place for giving or receiving financial advice, advice concerning investment decisions, tax, or legal advice. Please note as well that Supreme Cannabis is a client of New Cannabis Ventures. We host a dedicated page on our site that helps visitors learn more about the company, the fact-based, data-driven investor dashboard. Investor dashboards quickly tell the official story and financial status about the company. You can visit the Supreme Cannabis dashboard to get the most updated financial information and news on the company. At New Cannabis Ventures, our primary goal is to help our readers learn about and connect with the leading cannabis companies in the industry. We are pleased to be able to go beyond our normal content with the webinar format, which is going to allow our audience to get to hear directly from the CEO of Supreme Cannabis. I've personally been following Supreme since August 2014, and it's been great to see them begin to execute on the rather unique business model of exclusive B2B focus, with the company just reporting sales of $3.6 million in its fiscal Q4 ending June 30th, capping its first year of revenue generation that totaled $8.85 million. This makes the company one of the highest revenue generators among all LPs, well ahead of companies with considerably higher market caps, and in 7th place among all publicly traded LPs. Supreme has been able to forge supply agreements with the key provinces and is on track to complete the build out of its hybrid greenhouse. With solid execution demonstrated, the company announced a management change last month, which I'm sure Nav will discuss in detail, as former CEO John Fowler and former President Nav Dhaliwal swapped roles. I've known Nav, who brings a capital markets expertise to the company for several years, and he's been more visible in recent months to investors. But today is a great opportunity for many of you to hear from Nav for the first time as he discusses what lies ahead for the company. On the heels of Supreme's recent FY18 financial update and last month's announcement of a second and much larger supply agreement with Tilray, and following last week's consumer cannabis launch in Canada, this is a great time to listen to Nav share his perspective. Please note that we normally allow audience participation during our webinars. In this case, we've opted to host today's event without doing so after the company was forced to cancel the scheduled webinar at the last moment due to the pricing of what turned out to be a $100 million convertible note offering last month. Our goal today is to get the webinar out as quickly as we could following the end of that quiet period. So now please welcome Supreme Cannabis CEO Nav Dhaliwal, who will talk to us about the company, a company of firsts and a global trailblazer in the legal cannabis industry. Hello, Nav.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
I'm great. Let's get rolling.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. And again, apologies to you and your subscribers for having to cancel our webinar last time. But as you mentioned, hands were somewhat tied. We closed our financing on Friday for $100 million. So just wanted to apologize again for that. So we'll start off. So it's Supreme, we trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange as the ticker FIRE. Quickly, Supreme is a globally focused cannabis company which produces products and distributes products which are consumer-centric. Our goal is to have proprietary value around the businesses that we build and the products that we produce, and we definitely are a globally focused company. To quickly touch on the ticker FIRE, for us, FIRE symbolizes our passion for the industry. And, in the industry, especially in recreational markets, FIRE is a term to refer to the highest quality of cannabis products. So company highlights to start off. As you mentioned, we're quite a young management team. We take a very long-term view on the business and the industry. As you mentioned, recently, John and myself, we switched roles, and really the reasoning for the switch was to really prepare ourselves for growth. In terms of how we operate the business, John has always been the cannabis savant, focused on operations and really building the business and products which customers will desire and which we believe will have a high demand for. My focus has primarily been on the capital markets, go forward strategy, growth strategy. So is really to realign ourselves and prepare ourselves to what we're preparing for is an aggressive growth stage for the company. So in terms of, we always take a long-term market thesis, and with our initial business, the objective was to focus on an area of the business which we believe is quite important for a global cannabis company that scaled cultivation in a regulated environment, and we wanted to focus to ensure we had a competitive advantage in that aspect. Two, we are very consumer focused, so our strategy to begin was, really identifying where we saw the strongest market for our business, and that was with cannabis enthusiasts. So to produce products that are going to be desirable to these consumers, which I think is somewhat of a misunderstood consumer. In our view, the cannabis consumer with the consumer that we want as a customer is a very discerning consumer. This is a consumer that's had access to black market products for a long time. They've developed their QA processes, etc., and they demand quality. So we're always a consumer-focused business. In terms of the benefits of focusing early, I believe we're one of the fastest scaling companies in the country. So we're producing approximately an annual run rate of 13,500 kilos a year, and we're well on pace for completing construction by the end of the year and ramping up to our projected full capacity of 50,000 kilos mid-2019. And as you mentioned, we completed a fairly successful first year of revenue, which we believe is one of the highest ranking first years of any LP to date. And we're focused on building brands. So we take a very different view in terms of how we build brands. We're focused on building authentic brands, not numerous brands, which in our view could just be different logos, different packages, etc. But we spend a lot of time focusing on the culture. We believe our people represent our brand quite well, and we're looking forward to establishing 7 Acres as what we believe will be one of the top premium brands in the country. And also we focus quite a bit on establishing distribution agreements. So we're excited to send out shipments this week to the 6 provinces that we're listed in. That was quite important for us to validate our business model, and we'll touch on this a little bit later. Is our business model was always meant to be B2B. So initially in the medical channel, we wholesaled product to other licensed producers, and now we're just shifting from selling to one business to other businesses. And lastly, in terms of our corporate strategy, our focus is making disciplined investments which are in line with our long-term market thesis of building competitive advantage in the businesses that we choose to build. So we can move on to the next slide. So just quickly to touch on the global landscape. Last week with Canada legalizing for adult use purposes, our view is we're at the beginning of end of prohibition globally. Our view is globally you're going to see legalization of medical. And, in addition to Canada being the first G7 country, our view is you'll see other markets also establish adult use frameworks. We believe Canada's done a great job in leading the way in terms of a policy perspective. And then overall, from a business standpoint, our view is it's an absolutely enormous market, medical and adult use, regardless of which projections you're looking at. 180 billion today, 200 billion just in medical. Point being, we're at the beginning of a global trend towards legalization, and it's an absolutely enormous market opportunity. At the moment, we're focused on our first business, 7 Acres, which is a Canadian recreational opportunity. So if we were to compare that to alcohol, once you include ancillary markets, alcohol is approximately a $22 billion market. Over time, we believe the Canadian market will be about 22 billion, with ancillary markets included. But regardless, which reports you look at, 5 to 10 billion, it's a very rare opportunity to create brand new product categories, be on the shelves at the beginning of legalization. So we're quite excited about our 7 Acres business being established as one of the premium cannabis flower brands in the country. So just to touch on 7 Acres quickly, 7 Acres was licensed in 2016. As I mentioned, our objective was to focus entirely on scaled cultivation of quality product and generate revenue from a B2B revenue model. So we've been quite satisfied with how we've been scaling. We're approximately 13,500 kilos run rate production at the moment, and we're expected to finish construction on that facility at the end of the year here, and mid 2019 we'll scale up to that 50,000 kilo run rate. And the reason for that is, the scale is the majority of the time to scale up is all around bringing in the people, building that into your production cycles, training the people, and ensure you can manage the business at this scale as well. As that's where we spend a lot of our time, and ensuring that the people that we're bringing to this business also fit with the culture. That's something we're quite proud of. At 7 Acres, we have a very strong culture. And just to touch on a very interesting stat we had over the last couple of weeks is, we did an engagement survey amongst our people, and it was with a third-party advisor as well. And what we were told is, typically engagement surveys in the 20 to 30% among staff. And what that really means is the people have an emotional attachment to the brand, to the business. And we were quite, surprised where our engagement survey was up around 80%. And that's something we take a lot of pride in, meaning, we're very focused on establishing a strong culture for the long-term success of the business. And so far, we've been quite successful in terms of premium pricing as well. In terms of what we've announced, average pricing is $6 a gram wholesale and above. And so in terms of, how we built this business and how we determined our strategy, we start with the consumer. I think sometimes in our industry, you hear a lot about how big the markets are, how great of a business opportunity is. But in the adult use space, it's a consumer packaged goods industry, and consumer is the first word of that industry. And we take a lot of time to understand our consumer. So what we target with our initial business at 7 Acres is a legal age cannabis enthusiast, what we call a LACE. And what we've determined through our research nationwide is this is a very discerning consumer. Our view is all of the licensed producers in the country should have strong objective quality given how regulated we are, but we focus a lot on subjective quality, meaning, aromas of the product, the visual appeal of the product, and the ultimate taste of the product. And our research clearly shows that discerning consumers will not tolerate a low quality product over the long term. And for our business, we believe it's very important to provide this consumer a high quality product because we believe that's what provides us long-term pricing stability and pricing power. And even the finance minister in Ontario, he made a comment about 20% of the users will generate approximately 80% of the demand and the revenue in the industry. So our business is really built based on the consumer and approach focus on that. So in terms of our strategy for 7 Acres to begin, our strategy was quite simple. Number one, it was produce a quality product. We believe we've been successful at that. We've had strong demand in the wholesale space. As you mentioned, we recently announced a $12 million guaranteed supply deal with Tilray, which is a great company. They've been very successful at patient acquisition, patient services. So I think that's a testament to a quality of our product. Two was to scale that quality production. Producing high quality cannabis, which includes subjective aspects, is quite challenging. And that was the key problem we looked to solve in terms of our business is how do we do this at scale? And the results so far have been very promising. We believe our quality is only getting better. And we believe our revenue to date is also showing the strength in terms of how we're scaling. And lastly, from a business perspective, if we're focusing on quality, we want to ensure we're receiving premium pricing. So our pricing averages, $6 and above per gram, and that's in the wholesale space. And we continue to see strong demand. So overall, in terms of the strategy for 7 acres, quality product at scale and achieving strong pricing, I believe we've been successful across the board. And to move on to more the importance of flower, I think we hear a lot of comments in the industry regarding, flower, the future is non-flower products, et cetera, et cetera. But, our view is flower is still the largest market in Canada, even in the US in maturing states, and globally. I think a lot of stats show relative market share, but when we look at aggregate sales volumes, flower is still an increasing business. But more so, I think having a skill in flower and having a supply chain of quality flower is a strategic advantage as we look forward to the introduction of concentrate products, et cetera, because the lucrative products in the maturing U.S. markets are around the concentrates. So these are your shatters, rosins, waxes, etc., which we're still waiting for regulatory clarity from the Canadian government. But the point is, these products are an extension of the quality of the flower product. It's basically a purification. So meaning, if you're producing a lower quality product, it's likely that you're not going to produce a quality concentrate product. And the other thing is, our view is the consumer that the cannabis enthusiast that consumes a high volume of flower is the same consumer that's going to move over to the concentrate products or supplement with concentrate products. Our view is it's not the new consumer that's coming in and buying large volumes of these type of products. And then so lastly, where we've spent a lot of time in developing proprietary value around the production of flower. So you can move on to the next slide. Because we believe it's an important skill. So, our view is that it begins with genetics, and it's not just the strain, et cetera. It's also how you select genetics, how you phenotype, and it's from a business perspective. So, our view is if genetics had been selected for yield or other items other than subjective qualities like aromas, taste, visual appeal, those are challenging things to fix, and they take time to fix. And number two is the foundation is the infrastructure. If you've made mistakes in terms of determining strategy from a low cost perspective, it will take a long time to improve infrastructure to produce a quality product. So we believe infrastructure has to be purpose built for the quality spec in terms of the output. And then in addition to that, it's procedures of how you produce quality, it's how you scale those procedures, and it's the management systems of how you operate these businesses. And then lastly, what we spend a lot of time on is, putting a lot of that proprietary value and intelligence into technology. So we're spending a lot of time and effort at the moment in terms of, custom built software. So this is more stitching the right software together with the certain proprietary aspects that we require, not building the software from scratch. And lastly, our view is it's culture that's going to hold it all together over the long term. So we spent a lot of time and effort in really having proprietary value around regulated cultivation at scale. And we believe we're building a competitive advantage around this aspect of the business. So in terms of looking forward for Catalyst, we're focused on scaling 7 acres to that 50,000 kilograms of projected output per year. We expect that mid 2019 from a scale perspective, hitting that run rate. Construction will be completed towards the end of 2018. We're quite excited about launching 7 acres as a premium brand and having that on the shelves fairly soon here. And as we prepare for growth, we're spending a lot of time in terms of talent development, bringing in the right team to prepare for growth. I think sometimes we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. It's a very dynamic and exciting market, and there's a lot of things we can do. But we really wanted to ensure that we continue the success that we've had with 7 Acres as a business to ensure we have the right team to execute on growth moving forward. So as we look to receive clarity on concentrate products, we're preparing to that market. That's a market that we believe we have an advantage in, given that we have access to high quality flower. But you also see us move more towards medical non-flower products as well. We're aggressively assessing our international strategy. We made an investment recently in a licensed producer in Lesotho. Very similar strategy with that. We believe that's an asset that will have a long-term advantage in a global medical oils market. We continue to look at all of our investments from a very disciplined lens. So Alan, I hope that provides a good summary of what we've been up to, where we've been spending a lot of effort, and how we're preparing for the next phase in terms of our growth strategy, which is absolutely going to be an international and global growth strategy.
That was great, Nav. Thank you. I have a few questions now, if we could proceed.
Absolutely.
So first of all, you talked about the management change, and I'm just curious, A, how long was that in the making? And B, could you talk about kind of the whole makeup of your management team now and where that's headed? Are you fully staffed on your senior executive team?
Yeah, so one, in terms of the change, it was really a product of how we were preparing for growth. So we're at a point now where we're quite happy with the 7 Acres business plan and how it's coming along. So it was really John and I spending a lot of time in terms of, okay, well, how are we going to position ourselves for growth? How are we going to structure the business to continue to build good operating assets and ensure that they're operating at a high standard, and then still be prepared for aggressive growth, because I think in terms of we feel quite confident given our execution track record. So it's really planning for growth. How are we going to structure our team? How are we going to build new assets? How are we going to look at M&A, et cetera? So it's really a product of planning for growth strategy, and then just aligning our existing focus and skill sets to ensure that we continue to build good operating assets, but we're also moving very quickly in terms of growth initiatives. Number two, in terms of where the team's at, starting with the board, we're quite happy with our board as well. We have a very active and experienced chairman. We recently added a gentleman named Colin Moore, ex-president of Starbucks Canada, who is leading that company through growth. A gentleman named Ron Factor from Deloitte, who is a workflow process engineer, which has provided us a lot of benefit building out the 7 Acres business. Scott Walters, I'm sure who you're familiar with, ex-investment banker, and now actually brought him on as an officer. So and that was, again, to really prepare ourselves for growth, given that his investment banking background brought him on as VP of Corporate Development. In addition to that, quite a strong CFO in terms of Dmitry Naumov. He serviced a lot of the top Canadian companies while he was at KPMG. General Counsel Soni Gokhale, she was in-house at BlackBerry during their growth stage, so done a lot of international business. Also Omer Aziz on the marketing side, who comes from spent 15-20 years at Philip Morris, so we believe that gives us a very good advantage when we look at regulated marketing. But absolutely others to add as well. We recently added a gentleman named Barinder Buller. So Barinder was Director of Policy for the Premier of BC, Christy Clark. Lots of international experience, led many trade missions for the government of British Columbia, Southeast Asia, elsewhere. So really ramping up for international growth as well there. So we're quite happy with the strength of our team, but we're definitely actively looking to add to the team and fill it out over the next few months here.
Great. And then when y'all made the announcement, one of the featured highlights was that John was going to be focusing on the indoor facility. Can you address kind of the timeline for that indoor facility and how exactly that fits into your long-term strategy to have this, I guess, higher premium bud?
So absolutely. So one is our view is, majority of the market is going to demand quality. And when we looked at the Canadian landscape, we saw a lot of movement towards low-cost greenhouse. So if you look at the supply dynamics, we expect a lot of low-cost product to come onto the market. So we believe there's going to be significant pricing pressure in that product quality segment. So our view is indoor produces the absolute highest quality of product. Even our greenhouse facility, which is really just an indoor facility with a glass roof, has lighting, etc. And even with most of the provincial distributors, we're categorized as indoor because it's still delivering that indoor-esque quality. We believe it's important to have the capability to produce indoor product. So where we're at in terms of timing is, we're well advanced in terms of the design and budgeting stage with that project. So over the next few weeks, we'll provide some guidance in terms of what that looks like. But the intention there is to really have a design for an indoor facility that can be recreated. If that's more domestic production in Canada or elsewhere, our view is indoor provides a lot of benefits for medical, which we believe is getting even more and more sophisticated, given the control it can provide over cannabinoid profiles, etc. We believe, that's going to be a strong. We believe there will be strong pricing for indoor product, and we're even seeing that with some of the early reviews in legalization. Here is the indoor product is getting good reviews, more so than non-indoor product.
Switching gears, branding. You guys have done something a little bit different from many of your peers in that you introduced your brand 7 Acres as a medical brand and are using the same branding for the adult consumer market. And I'm curious how, going forward, do you plan to introduce different brands in Canada? And then also in terms of globally, will you use the 7 Acres brand?
So 7 Acres will transition more to be an adult use brand. As we move forward in terms of our medical strategy over time, you'll see us coming out with more of a medical brand. But yes, 7 Acres is meant to be a adult use focused brand for the cannabis enthusiast that enjoys high-end flower.
Okay, and then I think a lot of people fail to understand the medical market. You guys have disclosed a revenue program of $6 to $7, but that's a wholesale. So you don't have a lot of the cost that's embedded in maintaining a call center, for instance. And I'm just curious, over time, do you plan on in other markets using the same strategy of finding distribution partners, or will you build your own distribution model?
Yeah, so I would say we'd probably take a similar strategy. Our business is focused on producing and distributing cannabis products with distribution partners. Our view is, I think the vertically integrated mail order model was something unique in the Canadian landscape. Our view is over time, you'll see more medical retailers, meaning pharmacies, etc. We haven't seen any indication in terms of timing, but our view is, early stage markets all mature and you see segmentation. So we want to focus on building the proprietary value around producing the products. And you're seeing this internationally already. So for example, Canada in the medical segment is still mail order, but now you look at a country like Germany. Germany is going into an established distribution platform with nationwide pharmacies. So our strategy is to focus on the production side of things and not get into retail. Our view is, they're different businesses, and we'd rather focus on building proprietary value around the products and building those brands versus retailing and distributing those products as well.
Okay, and then I believe you guys are the only ones in Canada that have a 100% B2B strategy. There's some others that are have hybrid models where they're definitely doing some wholesaling, although many of them have cut back with the short-term shortage of product. My question for you, because we just learned recently that the Tilray deal was white label, meaning that it's not going to be 7 acres. Whereas I think most of your other deals, if not all, have been branded product. And I want to understand better if the economics are different on this, or do you still get the same price if you're allowed to talk about that roughly? I just want to understand kind of going forward the differences between white label and branded distribution and the economics and where you're headed in that area.
Yeah, so I can't comment too much on the exact pricing, but what I can say is the pricing is similar. The demand for the product is still quite strong. In terms of medical, medical, we're comfortable wholesaling, but in terms of adult use, you'll always see our brand. But as I mentioned, over time, the intention is 100% of our product goes into the adult use markets.
Got it. And then you touched on South Africa a little bit, and I know there's been some other activity there. I also know you guys are really excited about it. I was wondering if you could just take a minute to talk about this opportunity, what it means for Supreme, and then also to address other international opportunities that you're assessing. Not
Sure.
South
So
Africa, I'm sorry, Lesotho.
yeah, so one in terms of Lesotho, so I believe we were the first company to really make a significant investment over there, and the business plan is very similar to our initial one. So that's invest in a business that's going to have a long-term advantage. Our view is that that's a jurisdiction that will have an advantage when it comes to cultivation of input product. That business is meant to be a 100% cannabis oil producer for international markets. It was also a very strong team. We're really happy with the team that we have there, the partners that we have there. Substantial capital went into the project well before we invested, and that's a business that's quite advanced. We're producing product there. We're almost complete in terms of extraction facilities, etc. So that's something we'll provide more guidance to the market fairly soon. So can't talk about it too much, but it's a project we are absolutely excited about, and definitely there's some work to do. Opening up export channels, etc. And number two, looking more at international. To us, Europe is a very exciting market because just given how Germany's gone, I think our view is a lot of the new markets there will take a lot of learnings from Canada. So our view is that distribution models will be much more advanced, Germany being a good indicator. But overall, that's a large market. It's a trade zone. You have a well-established healthcare as well, so insurance backing, etc. So EU is a very exciting market to us. And that's an area we'll be looking at quite closely and looking to make some inroads.
As a follow-up to that, it seems like you guys would be well positioned to find a partner in Germany that would allow you to build a facility there. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
I wouldn't say we've made final decisions in terms of where we would build or what business models we would go after. Germany is absolutely an exciting market. So there is a tender going on at the moment. But I think the immediate opportunity with Germany is to distribute into that market because there is significant demand. So at minimum, that's a very exciting market to distribute into, but also a very strategic market to be based in.
Got it. So export now, but hopefully over time have production capacity there, I would say. The next question, you're focused on, you said, shifting your business really to fully into the adult consumer market. And I'm just curious, you spent some time talking about who your targeted consumer is. Do you believe that your targeted consumer is a black market or illicit market consumer right now? And or do you have any plans to try to get new consumers that may not have experienced cannabis over the last decade or two?
Yeah, so our consumer at the moment is a cannabis enthusiast. It's a consumer that currently enjoys cannabis and has over time become a very discerning consumer in terms of looking for quality. And an interesting insight that we've discovered or recently is, our view is when you look at new consumers, it takes a very short period of time, in our view, and a very minimal amount of education before even a new consumer becomes a discerning consumer. So that's why education is a very important aspect for us. And what I mean by that is you can take a new consumer and just teach them about the basics in terms of, a quality product. This is a pleasant aroma. This is the visual appeal a high quality product should have. This is how it should burn, or this is how, this is a pleasant taste. And what we've discovered is it takes a very short period of time for even a new consumer to become discerning, because it's in terms of a flower product, it is a very intimate experience, meaning, consumers enjoy smelling the product, they enjoy looking at it, they enjoy chopping it up themselves. And in terms of comparing it to other markets, so like a wine market, for example, the difference from a cost perspective to move up the quality graph is not as impactful, or is not as big as it would be in other markets. So for example, if you want a lower quality wine product, you're in that $10 to $20 category. If you want more of a higher quality product, it's a significant increase. Whereas versus a cannabis flower, you're either paying $7 or you're paying $15, for example, just using round numbers. It's much less of an economic impact. So, point being, we're quite confident in terms of how our product will be received by the existing consumer, which is an enthusiast. But more so is our view is that even new consumers very quickly become discerning as long as they get the education.
Got it. And then extracts, obviously an area where you haven't yet shared your full strategy yet. I'm curious about the timeline and what your strategy is going to be there. Do you expect to build your own extraction facility, or there's a number of LPs and licensed dealers now that are providing the service? What's your take on that?
Yeah, we're assessing that at the moment, so we'll provide guidance fairly soon in terms of how we move into that. But as I said, where we feel confident is, and we're getting this feedback from companies that are looking to purchase our trim, which also goes for a very strong price, is that we're very comfortable moving, either doing that with a partner or possibly building our own capacity, because we have the supply chain aspect, meaning the flower. So even, if you want to produce a good quality extract, or if you want it to be economical and get good yields on it, you need good input. And we have very strong demand for our trim because of those reasons. So you'll see us providing guidance fairly soon, but we're assessing both.
Got it. And I get it, because right now the current product set for oils is not particularly exciting, and I would imagine a high-end producer like yourselves is looking forward to next year when some better products are introduced, right?
Yeah, to comment on that aspect in terms of concentrates, that's definitely, given we believe we have an advantage because we have access to the high quality flower, that's definitely an area in terms of, those products we would likely look to build in-house versus oils or oils for medical, et cetera.
Got it. And then my last question, I'm just kind of curious, you've been involved with Supreme for a while, obviously the CEO shortly, but commenting on your full experience there, can you talk about some of the biggest bottlenecks you've hit? I would imagine hiring, quality control, things like that, but what have been some of these challenges and how have you guys overcome them?
Yeah, so number one, it's a competitive industry, so finding the right people. So we take our time in terms of adding to our team. That's definitely been one of the challenges, and I would say bottlenecks. Two, I would say, is remaining focused. It's such a dynamic market there's so much opportunity. You hear about you're inundated with opportunities daily. So I think we really take a lot of pride in our focus, and we're starting to see it pay dividends now. So again, going back to the realignment, we want to make sure the businesses we build and the investments we make are all strong operations. So I would say it's talent. Two is focus, and then number three, just the expected challenges of running a large cultivation business, because it's a challenging business. It's not easy. You have to really love the cultivation aspect to be good at it. In our opinion, you have to be passionate about it. And the fact is, if you look across the country, there's not much scaled production yet. Yes, there's large greenhouses going up, but there's only a handful of producers. Like in terms of production, it's still quite minimal. And to touch on funded capacity, et cetera, that's been a metric that's been really out there a lot. Our view is we can increase our capacity by doing a deal for a large greenhouse. Our view is existing capacity that's scaling with a strong management group and a management system is far more valuable than future capacity.
All right, well, that sounds great. I really appreciate your taking the time to talk to our audience today, and I know everybody appreciates that as well. For our listeners out there, to get in touch with Supreme, of course, you can always visit our investor dashboard. We have a lot of information there, and on the slide here, to contact their IR is an email address, ir@supreme.ca, and of course, you can visit their website at supreme.ca. So thank you again, Nav, and to our audience for tuning in today.
Thanks, Alan. Always a pleasure speaking with you.